Hearing with the Assembly Local Government Committee, as well as the members of JLAC, Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and the purpose of our hearing is to receive testimony from the State Controller's Office as a result of the audits that they have conducted regarding the City of Bell. We also will have a brief presentation from representatives from the City of Bell as well. This is our first hearing of the year, and we want to thank everybody for taking the time to come out. Obviously, the circumstances around the City of Bell that broke last year really has facilitated numerous efforts by the legislature and others regarding the importance of transparency and accountability, not only at local governments but at all levels. And we hope that this hearing today and the report from the Controller's Office will help continue that effort and provide information to the legislature as we move forward through this session to find ways to tighten some of the loopholes that we found were exploited, and make sure that we can help restore some of the trust of the constituents, not only in the City of Bell but as well as the state of California. That when we see instances like this, we will take action, and our intent is to find a way to keep our government system open and available to the people of California, and we hope this hearing will help us move forward with that. I'd also like to invite the chair-elect, I believe, of the JLAC committee, Mr. Lara, to say a few words as well.
Oh, got it. I'm learning. Still a rookie.
I'm here to help you out. That's all right.
Right on. I just wanted to thank the members of the Local Government Committee and the members of JLAC. This is a very important issue, as you can imagine, for the constituents in the 50th District, which I proudly represent. The issue of Bell, and I think I want to applaud the work that the Assembly has done to address this issue last year. We've gotten to a place where the constituents were demanding government intervention, and now to a point where we have so much government intervention in the City of Bell that it's, I think, important to have this meeting so that we can give the constituents a clear understanding of what all the audit findings are, and provide a framework so that we can move forward and ensure that the City of Bell continues to prosper and that it is run in a manner that is ethical, transparent, and honest. And so I'm looking forward to hearing the testimony of the State Controller's Office and hear from the interim city manager and city attorney in the City of Bell to really talk about what measures they've taken to ensure that this does not happen in Bell again. So thank you so much, and look forward to the testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What we'd like to do now is invite the representatives from the Controller's Office. All of you that are a part of the agenda, please come on forward, and however you wish to organize the presentation within your findings, that would be great. And just some housekeeping for the members. If you do have questions, just alert the staff, and Mr. Lara and I will make sure we get you, and we'll be able to get your questions put out to the panelists as quickly as possible.
Good morning. My name is Walter Barnes. I'm the chief of the Special Projects section in the Audits Division of the State Controller's Office. My purpose today is to give you a presentation on the overview of the results of the audits of Bell and some of the things that we feel caused the issues in Bell, and a few things that we're looking at or have implemented to try and deal with those issues on a going forward basis. I also have members of the audit team, so that to the extent that you want to go into more detail about the specifics of a particular audit exception or finding, they are available to help you out. The Office of State Controller conducted 4 separate audits of the financial operations of the City of Bell. One was on administrative and internal controls, dealing with compensation, bond management, and expenditure control. We also looked at the gas tax fund, which is state money that's provided to the city. We also looked at a number of state and federal expenditures from programs that have been provided to the city. And we looked at the City of Bell Redevelopment Agency. In addition, the controller conducted a quality control review of the independent audits that were performed of the city and the redevelopment agency by the firm of Meyer, Hoffman, McCann. Generally, the 4 audits that we performed of the city found that the City Council and its city administration oversight and internal controls that you would normally expect to find in place to either deter or prevent waste, fraud, abuse, and misappropriation were virtually non-existent in Bell. The former chief administrative officer, for all intents and purposes, had complete control and discretion over how city funds and funds from the state and federal government were used. In those instances where city ordinances had been put in place requiring approval by the City Council, they were either ignored or issues were routinely approved with little or no discussion. Finally, top administrative staff and most of the City Council members benefited from this arrangement through increased compensation and or personal loans from city funds. The major issues, first off, the City Council imposed 3 illegal increases to taxes and direct assessments, and the city made unallowable charges to tax revenues. These actions cost the residents and the business community nearly $6.8 million. The controller recommended that the City of Bell take action in concert with the county tax assessor when needed to reduce future unallowable taxes and assessments and to issue refunds for unallowable taxes and assessments collected. To date, we understand the city has taken action to reduce and refund taxes related to meeting pension fund obligations. Refunds for this one tax increase were expected to total in excess of about $2.9 million. In the area of cash compensation and other personnel matters, the former CAO used his delegated authority to increase cash compensation of the top 6 administrators, including his own, to nearly $5.1 million over a 2-year period. While these increases were approved by the City Council, there was little or no discussion or oversight associated with these administrators in carrying out their performance and duties. He also increased the cash compensation of 4 of the City Council members to over $100,000 per year. Granted $1.5 million in city-financed, low-interest personal loans to city employees and to City Council members. And he also used city funds to repay $93,000 in separate personal loans of the CAO. Our audit recommended that the city take action to collect all outstanding loans as soon as legally possible and to not issue those types of loans in the future. The city has taken action to reduce the salaries of the city employees and council members, and I believe the city manager is here today so he can give you a little more information on that as well. The city also issued and got approval for the authorization of $75 million in bonds from the voters. This was called Measure A. Measure A bond funds have resulted in nearly $27 million in expenditures to build a sports complex, which was the prime purpose for the issuance, to build some city parks, and to make some other city improvements. Some parks have been built. However, the expenditures to the sports complex have only an empty lot to show for them. In addition, the city lost $1.7 million in interest for unspent funds, which were deposited in a non-interest-bearing account. Let's see, at the time of the audit, $50 million had been issued. We provided recommendations which included safeguarding the remaining $23.5 million of bond money that had not been spent, and developing a plan to identify the need and alternatives for using this money and the unissued $25 million going forward. In some of the town hall meetings that we were present, one of the issues and questions that came up was whether or not they should issue the $25 million at all, and whether they should use the $22 million to actually pay down the debt to avoid incurring future debt problems for the city. There was $10.4 million paid to a contractor to provide engineering services to the city's various projects. Part of the payments to the contractor was for the owner of this company to act as the city's director of planning. So besides the potential for conflicts of interest, the contract actually expired in June of 1997. And yeah, I mean 1997. But the contractor continued to be paid. $300,000 of city funds were used to provide a loan to an auto dealer, local auto dealer, that defaulted when he closed shop and left town. This is an instance of a loan under the city ordinance that should have been approved by the city council, and it was not. The city purchased real property from a former mayor for $4.8 million in 2009, even though it was acquired by the former mayor for only $480,000 in 1991. There's no documentation to explain why the property was chosen to be purchased or what it would be used for. And in addition, there was insufficient information to determine whether the purchase price was reasonable. We found $1.2 million in unsupported expenditures of state and federal funding. This includes about over $520,000 of unsupported expenditures from gas tax funds provided by the state of California. The audit recommended that the city contact each of the federal state agencies affected, all of whom actually received a copy of the report, to determine how to best resolve these issues. With regard to the Bell Community Redevelopment Agency, the board itself was composed entirely of members of the City Council, who allowed the former CAO to direct its operations. So the results were fairly similar to the city operations as we've described them above. Unallowable labor costs to pay of about $242,000 to pay for part of the salary of the former CAO and others. And in addition, unallowable charges to the low and moderate income housing fund. Findings and recommendations for this audit were pretty similar to the ones for the administrative and internal control audit. With regard to the quality control review of the annual audit reports of the city and the City Redevelopment Agency by the independent audit firm of Meyer, Hoffman, and McCann, we found that the firm had failed to follow or fully comply with many fieldwork audit standards, federal compliance audit standards, and state RDA compliance audit requirements. Had they fully complied with these standards, some, if not all, of the problems uncovered by our audits may have been able to be identified a lot earlier. Now, a copy of the report was sent to the Board of Accountancy for information for action as they deem appropriate. I should say that as a result of the publicity surrounding the Bell audits, our office has received a number of complaints about various local governments that indicate that Bell may not be entirely unique. Controller's office is looking and consulting with the current administration on changes that can be made within our current authorities and possible expansion of authorities that could identify and mitigate the issues such as those that were found in Bell. And I should speak just for a minute about what some of those issues might be. For instance, the controller has the authority to issue what's called accounting guidelines to special districts, but it doesn't have that same authority for cities and counties. The controller has the authority to issue audit guidelines to independent auditors of counties, but it doesn't have the same authority for cities. With regard to the annual independent audits that are performed by agencies like Meyer, Hoffman, McCann, by and large, we have a responsibility to receive copies of those audits and to determine a certification as to whether or not, as to form, it seems to meet audit requirements. But by and large, we only get those and have the authority to get those audits for single audits only, which are basically those agencies that have received more than $500,000 of federal funding. All counties, obviously, meet that test. Most cities, very few special districts have that requirement. We also should say that the state controller does have a lot of authority to go out and audit local governments, but specifically directed at protecting state and federal pass-through money. So state general fund, special funds, federal pass-through money. We do a number of audits. We audit for mandates. We audit the gas tax and road fund. We audit for property tax and court cost penalty allocations related to revenue allocations to make sure the state is giving its fair share of those revenues, things like that. When it comes to audits of local funded operations, our authority is somewhat limited. By and large, that limitation relates to the legislative requirement that all of these local governments provide an annual report of financial transactions. If, in fact, we find that there may be some problem associated with that financial transaction report that indicates that it's either incorrect or fraudulent or misleading, we can initiate what's called an investigation and to go out and collect the information that we need to make a determination of what change should be made. And we also have under that the authority to charge the local agency for the costs of our effort. However, the problem with this is that wading through all of these thousands of reports, trying to make some decisions about them, and to develop the initiative to go out and take a look at some of these audits means that we don't have an awful lot of ability to identify them as quickly as we should. Many of these issues, since the audit reports reflect an annual report that comes in 6 months after the year, means that an issue that's breaking right now, we wouldn't even be able to identify it in the report for another year and a half, which allows many of the things in Bell took place over about a 3-year period that we found. So school districts also have a resource that they can use to try to deal with issues relating to financial problems. It's the FICMAC system, which basically provides a level of financial expertise to help school districts try to get themselves out of financial problems that they have. But there is no such item for local government. So we're, as I said, consulting with the administration on some proposals, both in dealing with additional resources as well as some changes in law that would allow us to provide some additional oversight related to local government financial operations. We think that's really critically important because there are a number of state rules or laws that have been put in place that apply to local government operations. As one example, Proposition 218. That proposition, which was passed by the voters, imposes certain limits on how local governments can raise or implement new taxes. But there is no specific state oversight associated with that. It's left up to the local governments to comply with it. One of the taxes that we mentioned was in violation of 218. So anyway, that's basically our presentation. I should say that one change that we've already implemented is to require all cities and counties to provide information on compensation made to employees and to place that information on the State Controller's website. We've given you the website address, and we also attached a presentation that gives you some more information on that as well. We'd be happy to answer any questions you have on any parts of this presentation, the audits, compensation, or other related matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. We'd like to, again, open it up to questions from the committee. Ms. Huber.
Thank you for your presentation, but also for putting the information on the state controller's website. One question I have for you is, how are we making sure that the public knows to go to the controller's site for that information? Because if I'm, the average voter, I want to find out what people are making at my city council. I want to go to the city council's website to find it, or the board of supervisors, I'm going to go to that website to find it. How are we making sure that people actually know to go to the controller's website?
George,
I'm George Lolis. I'm the Assistant Chief. Is this working? I'm George Lolis, the Assistant Chief of the Division of Accounting and Reporting. Primarily, we have the compensation information on our website. We have, through several press releases, notified the public that the information is out there. As we get questions, we explain to the public that the information is out there. We are currently have posted cities and counties. We are collecting information on special districts as well that will be posted soon. Again, it's a matter of just getting the word out to the public.
Well, you're saying when people call you, you get the word out, but are you doing any kind of information campaign to make sure that people know about it without them having to call? Because if they don't think that the controller's office is the hub for this information, they won't think to call you to ask you for your website address, right? So how are you getting that information out there so people actually know where to find it?
At this point, we are focusing on just getting it up there, and we do need to increase do some kind of a campaign to increase awareness. Again, with the limited resources we have, it's all the same people that would be doing everything, and getting the information up on the site, plus doing the campaign to notify the public. Again, we did issue the press release that the information was up there, and it was publicized in the media, and we just need to do more of that.
Thank you. Mr. Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and both Chairman Lara and Smythe for conducting this hearing, a hearing that I think is also important and well overdue as we look at oversight in local government. My comments are more comments than questions. The real issue here is that you can't legislate integrity. You can't legislate honesty. You can't legislate just a level of dignity and responsibility that you need in order to serve, be it local, state, or federal government. And I guess the most telling statement that you made here today is that there are more bills out there. And I have no doubt about that as an individual who spent 13 years in local government and serving with folks throughout the state of California. I know there are people who are asleep at the wheel and are allowing city managers and vice versa, councils who are controlling their city managers and abusing the privileges of serving in local governments. Our challenge here, again, I guess, is as legislators educating the public, and I guess it's a question, as Ms. Huber states, how do we get this information out outside of town hall meetings? And I guess, Chairman Smythe, would you be open, and Chairman Lara, of having some town halls throughout the state of California and some of these smaller communities to help and shed light on what clearly can exist in just about any city here in the state of California? But again, the real challenge is that there's no IQ test for running for office. There's no education requirements. All you have to do is be 18 years of age, a citizen in a state, and gather your signatures, and off you go. So we're left with a real challenge here.
As long as you're willing to join us, we're happy to put something together. Mr. Norby.
The position of city manager itself was created, I think, about 100 years ago in many states, and in California specifically during the progressive era. The idea that if you took the corrupt politicians out of governing day to day and replaced them with a technocrat who's expert in running a city, that you would have better government. And to a certain extent, it may have worked. The problem with it, though, is that it isolates power in the form of one person who still is, after all, a human being. But there is a pressure, as my colleague and good friend Assemblyman Bradford had said, on many cities, not just Bell, I call it the Bell syndrome, but a pressure to, once you're elected to a council, do what the staff wants, do what the city manager wants. That is pressure not just from staff, but oftentimes from colleagues that don't want to take the time or don't have the ability to take the time to understand the information before them, and just proceed as rubber stamps. And anyone who questions that is oftentimes marginalized as a gadfly or as a micromanager. That sometimes is the worst thing to be called in government. You're micromanaging. Let the experts do it. They've been doing it for so long. But micromanagement is nothing more than being a part of setting the policy and then making sure the policy is actually followed out. And in Bell's case, the council was neither setting policy nor carrying out policy. And there were some circumstances that are unique in certain cities, not unique, but certain cities have that maybe more than others. But I think a lot of them have that to an excessive degree, not just cities, but school boards as well. And so I think it's important to look at that. And this is a lesson not just to staffs, but to council members, that you're elected not as part of a team to rubber stamp what staff wants, but as an individual decision maker who has to bring your own judgment there. City councils are not teams. They're legislative bodies. We're certainly not a team here in the legislature. We're divided along partisan lines, so philosophical differences are more institutionalized. But I think that really is incumbent upon them to do so. As you mentioned, these are oftentimes seen as local funds, which the controller has limited use auditing ability over. Redevelopment agencies, though, legally are state agencies, and not only are these reports required of the controller, but those are state funds that the controller has some oversight over, and I'm glad that he did it here. I did want to be the first, maybe one of the first, to publicly thank the Los Angeles Times, without whose stories this probably would not have come to light in the same way, or when it finally did. I know they were basing it on some leaks, I think, from the Bell Police Department. It was that time series of stories that helped bring us here. And so a vigorous free press has to do with this as well. I did have a question regarding the auditing firm. What was the name of that firm again that did the independent audit of the city?
It was Mayer Hoffman McCann.
Okay, now their defense is that these funds were so carefully hidden that there was no way that they could expose or monitor them. My concern about that is that what's the point of an auditing firm auditing a city if the city can game the system and just present a kind of Potemkin village to the auditor? Is that a fair defense in their regard, or were there things that they really should have done where they could have found this money? You seem to think that there was.
I think
our
feeling is that we identified a number of standards that they should have followed, and that had they done that, some of the things that, if not all of the things, in Bell would have been uncovered.
Was this unique to this firm, or did a lot of firms sort of do a cursory look? And was that unique to Bell, or are there a lot of cases out there where these audits really haven't performed what they've intended to do?
It's kind of like everything else associated with Bell. The more publicity there is about it, the more we begin to hear others. We actually have been working in one instance with a Northern California county, MODOC, that fell into some financial problems that were also not caught by their auditor. And so we did a work paper audit of them. And I would have to say that we found their work papers, their approach to it, even worse than Mayer McCann. So it's clear that the elements that have been put in place associated with oversight of cities and counties and local governments have some issues with them, and those are the things that we're trying to do. And I would agree with you that the more publicity that we have about these kinds of things, the more people become empowered, because I think, Mr. Norby, that it's the council is one, the city manager another, the employees. There's also the district attorney. There's the grand jury.
Well, once people are aware of this, and I think the times that a yeoman's job there, then they're the ultimate check and balance. Now, there are cities that don't really have functioning voters, but that's not the subject here, is it, Mr. Chairman? We'll discuss those later. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Lara.
I know there was a question in terms of there's a discrepancy between you think the sewage fees are illegal and the city is questioning the legality. I mean, refuting what you're saying. Can you expand on that for me in terms of how much money are we talking about and why you feel they were illegally collected?
Yeah. My name is Stephen Marr. I'm chief of the Local Government's Audits Bureau. And then to answer your question regarding, the city has contested our finding regarding the sanitation and sewage fee. Yeah, we questioned $621,000, and we're saying that there was an illegal assessment totaling $621,000, and that happens to be because it's a standby charge. We're saying that for all intents and purposes, all the records we looked at directed us to come to the conclusion that these were considered standby charges, and the city has contested that. And they sent a couple letters, and I think they're still looking into that. And we're probably going to follow up with that at a later date.
Could you just further elaborate on that? What does that mean to be a standby charge for some of us that are not in local government?
Okay, basically, a standby charge is a charge that you could charge to property owners of unincorporated areas. It's a charge to hook up sewers, and it's supposed to be charged only to those affected areas. And what the city did in this case was they charged it to other areas that already had sewer charges already hooked up already. They didn't charge just to the affected areas throughout the city.
So if we were to, say, maybe pursue legislation to reimburse the residents in Bow, could we determine who were the folks that paid this illegal fee?
They should have the records to show who actually overpaid that charge.
Hugh, I've got a question on the Measure A bond funds. I mean, how could bond counsel, let all of that, releasing of those funds? I mean, were you able to kind of look into that and to see it, because that is pretty abusive, to say the least. That and you would think that there'd be another oversight like a bond counsel that would raise questions or raise red flags.
It's a good question. I think in this particular case there were two issuance totaling $50 million in bonds. I think it was $15 million was the first issuance. 30 million. I'm sorry, 30 million in the first issuance. 15. Okay, thought I was right. 15 million in the first issuance and 35 in the second. The 15 million was actually put under a bond counsel and administered through a bond counsel. The 35 million was the bond counsel was appointed as the chief administrative officer was appointed as the bond counsel.
Is that legal? I mean, I know that's kind of a absurd question, but was it the council that appointed him as the bond counsel? Was it the city council that had getting the counts CIL and SEL confused? But
was it the bond?
I mean, how did the administrative officer be appointed bond counsel?
Well, okay.
My name's Andy Finlayson. I'm Chief of State Agency Audits. And it's our understanding that during the second issuance, through the paying agent agreement with U.S. Bank and National Association, that the CAO took on that role.
Wow.
And there was one $35 million deposit into a Wells Fargo bank account that was non-interest bearing. And from then on, that's where all the requisitions for the bond expenditures were funneled through.
Okay, thank you. I think that's really interesting information for the committee that we hadn't heard before. So that's very scary. Obviously, that could happen. And obviously ripe for other kinds of abuses. Any other questions for the Controller's Office, Mr. Leo?
Yeah, your report had highlighted that 6.8 million had been collected in illegal taxes and assessments, and that there was an effort, I think legislatively, to refund local residents 2.9 million. But what about the remainder of the 3.9 million? What's in play to reimburse or provide restitution to local residents?
Well, I think you may want to talk to the Bell manager who's going to be testifying in a few minutes. Essentially, as Steve mentioned, the city manager agreed with the first one, the pension bond, and worked to reduce it and to get the refunds out. I don't know where they are specifically with the rest of them. They did disagree with the one having to do with sanitation and sewage. And as I say, one of the issues for us is that our intent is to go back and to do at least a status review to determine how the city is dealing with all the various issues that we brought up and the recommendations. And as you can see, some of the recommendations have been implemented, some have not, so we are going to go in and try to find out at some point in time somebody, and it may even have to be the citizens themselves, are going to have to take some action to make sure that these refunds are made.
I just wanted to ask something about the gas tax fund. I know your recommendations were to reimburse the fund for payments that were done without contracts. And my question is, what happens if that money isn't repaid? And, I mean, does that put in jeopardy the fund? Or just what would happen if the city's unable to pay back to the gas tax fund?
Yeah, in terms of the gas tax funds, in that fund we have a little more teeth. We allocate highway users tax apportionments to cities, and they are supposed to spend it in compliance with Streets and Highways Code. In this case, we questioned over $500,000, and if the city does not restore that $500,000 back to the gas tax funds, we can direct the Comptroller's Office to withhold future gas tax apportionments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Campos.
Thank you. I wanted a little bit more clarification on the purchase, the land that was purchased by a former mayor. And I wanted to understand, did this ever go before the council to approve these funds, or was it just something that was done internally through the administration?
I believe in this case that it did go before the council, but there was no discussion. It was just...
So how was it presented? Just in a memo or verbal? I mean, that's a lot of money without any documentation on what they're going to use the land for.
That is correct. What we found, since we weren't there at the time, because we're looking backwards, is the city council minutes. There was a presentation, and then there was a vote. There was little or no discussion on any presentation.
But much of that probably was done in closed session, right? Because it was a property negotiation, and I know most of that can be done in a closed session in the council.
That is correct. Since it's a real estate purchase, it would be done in closed session.
Right, okay.
So was it presented as they were banking the land for future projects, or?
The city could not provide any rationale for why they purchased the land. They pointed to the prior CAO that was an idea that he had for something, and since he was no longer there, that information was no longer available.
And there was no documentation to show if it was at the market rate value of the price?
There was one appraisal that showed it was valued at $4.8 million, but during that time, one would hope that they would get more than one appraisal. That was during a real estate boom where I think appraisals could come and go as you needed them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this report, and thank you for your work. What transpired in Bell is definitely an enormous erosion of the public's led to an erosion of the public's confidence in government. You have made some recommendations, or at least started talking about accounting guidelines and auditing guidelines that would probably help to create some uniformity in how all jurisdictions across the state report, so that it could be more friendlier to the public. Everybody is subject to the same reporting guidelines under the Brown Act and other mechanisms like that. But how can we curb what is outright corruption in government? I mean, I understand the process for creating consistency. However, you know, this incident can give us an opportunity to, you know, to use this as an example how we can strengthen reporting requirements without necessarily punishing local agencies. You know, we don't necessarily want to overreact to the situation by punishing everyone else in the state that has been complying, whether they have or not. In my experience in local government, if you're a big city, grand juries tend to focus on the bigger government agencies and don't look at smaller jurisdictions, whether they're school boards or cities. If they're small enough to escape public scrutiny either through the media or grand jury, what can we do here at the state level to ensure that there's a lot of transparency in what's happening at all levels of government?
Well, as I said, some of the things that we're looking at is, first of all, trying to make sure that everybody is reporting and auditing on a consistent basis. Right now, we don't have that. The other aspect of it is, and Ms. Hubert mentioned it as well, the idea of publicizing information that's given to the public. Whether it's on compensation, whether it's on audit reports that we've done, whether it's on posting information, more information than we have right now. So I think there's a number of those things that we can do. And I think it's also important, as I mentioned, this was a failure right from the top to the bottom. The employees, the administrators, the council, the police chief, you know, all of these people, you know, were basically working together on what happened here. And to a certain extent, there was little or no expectation from them that anyone would look at them. They're a fairly small city, you know, located, you know, in a bigger, larger area with a lot more information. And so I think our feeling is that we need to have the ability to take a closer look at some of the types of issues that came up under, you know, the Bell system. We also need to be able to take a look closer at the audit agencies that are doing the third-party audits, and to make sure that they are continuing to, or that they are carrying out their responsibilities. So I think it's that feeling that nobody's looking, and so everybody, you know, is sort of all in associated with that, and we saw that in Bell. And I'm not saying that every other city or other cities are doing that, but in other cities and counties and special districts, we are getting a lot of indications that in some cases, you know, some of those same issues are starting to break down here. So those are the things that we've tried to, you know, put on the table in our discussions with the administration. I should also say, just to finalize, I did get some information about the hits on our compensation, and since we put it up in November, we've had almost 1.7 million hits. So doesn't mean that we shouldn't do more information to get it out there, but we should do as much as we can. And I should also say that the Comptroller's Office now, actually for the last year, has put on its website access to all of the various audits that it does as well, so that the public can get a hold of that. So those things are, again, things that frequently when I talk to citizens who are calling to complain, they're saying, where do I go? Where do I go to get help? Who's out there to help me? And those are the things that we're feeling we need to try to do.
I just have one quick question. You know, some of the challenges that we've been finding in terms of in the legislature is the challenge of charter cities and not being able, obviously, to legislate on some of these issues. But what do you think in terms of recommendations to secure transparency and honest government, in particular to charter cities?
You know,
If you got like 2 minutes, if you could answer that in 60 seconds. I'm just kidding.
Pardon?
You have 60 seconds to answer that question.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty good, but I'm not. I'm probably not that good. I would say that the complaints that we're getting are coming as much from charter cities as well as non-charter cities. Charter cities have more flexibility in terms of the decisions that they make. But again, to the extent that any city or county or whatever can make a decision and not have to worry too much about people finding out about what they're doing, that's when it breaks down.
Is there any other questions for the Controller's Office? Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate your time and your insight today.
Thank you.
And the committees have your information, so if any of the members have follow-up questions, we can certainly provide that so they can get to you directly as well.
Happy to do so.
Thank you, guys. At this time, we'd like to bring up the final part of our hearing and the final panel, and that is Pedro Carrillo, the interim city administrator of the City of Bell, as well as Jamie Casso, the interim city attorney. So somehow I have a feeling this is probably easier than some of the city council meetings you've had to sit through. So
I think your gut's correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity. It's really tough to be here today because it's really the first opportunity that we've had as an interim administration, not from a lack of being asked, but from the time perspective. The interim administration has worked about 12 or 14 hours a day since July 24th, which was our appointment, to try to fix a problem that we thought initially was a very simple one, classic case of salary spiking. And we took the challenge. We said, council members, this is what we believe is the issue, and we can resolve this. And at first look, what do you do as a CAO? You go and you check how much money you have, and you look at your accounts, and you try to balance between what's restricted and what's not restricted. And any good CAO can tell you that anything that is in a restricted account is obviously tied to either a bond or a special project, and that's hands off. So at first flush, you look at the budget and you say, wow, City of Bell, 30-something million in the bank, relatively quiet, salary scandal, this must be salary spiking, let's fix that. As you dig through it and you peel back the layers of the onion, actually it was about day 4, I called the controller's office and I actually spoke to the controller. And I said, something just doesn't make sense here. If we have so much money, I need some independence. I did what most people do, and that is take a look at the records. The audit said we were fine. Everything's fantastic. The budget was balanced for 5 years, in fact. Everything was flush, and there was no problem to be found. So the state controller at our request came on July 26th of last year and outlined systematically what was in his purview and what authority he needed to continue with that audit. I want to just say thank you to the controller and his staff. And he did a great job. There were a lot of pressures. We're working with 8 agencies. I think Chairman Lara spoke to that earlier. He said, we went from a place that had absolutely no controls and no oversight to everyone you could possibly think of working with the interim administration, trying to figure out what went wrong, why, and what steps are we taking, both short-term and long-term, to fix the problem. As we found, the controller has done a good job of reporting all of the findings. I think the tougher part is as an interim administration is to fix it. As we learned, the budget wasn't as ripe with funds as we once thought, and the challenges continue to grow, specifically with some of the criminal findings, some of the other audits that are not finished. So what we've done initially is to do what's within our control. One is trying to restore order and establish try to establish that trust that really the community has lost, and you don't blame them. The community of the City of Bell is upset, and rightfully so. The immediate reduction of council salaries and the immediate reduction of city staff salaries are one of the first actions we took on July 26th. The reduction of property taxes that action was taken on August 16th. And I might add that if it hadn't been for a very able and knowledgeable Assemblymember-elect, Assemblymember Lara, we might have not been as successful in getting that AB 900 passed. He worked, him and then Assemblymember Kevin De Leon worked diligently with the interim administration to make certain that we paid attention to the people and to the community instead of the politics and all of the buzz that was awry at that time. We've been trying to restore order and stabilize the community, and at the same time not forget that there is a community that we still have both a civic and a professional responsibility to. We still have to provide services. We still have to make certain graffiti's down and the police officers are on the street and that the parks are open and that infrastructure is operational and that all of those services that are mandatory are operational. So the administration is focused less on who's to blame. That will leave to the over 8 agencies that are currently either auditing or investigating the City of Bell, and focus more on making certain that we don't skip a beat with regard to services. We've immediately changed the reduction of fees to public records because what we found was that this problem didn't start just 3 years ago. I know that the Comptroller's Office focused on that because that was the benchmark. But this focus has systematically taken place in the City of Bell for over 17 years. In 1993, and I read over hundreds of thousands of documents because it's this interim administration that provides and coordinates with all those 8 agencies all of the information necessary to make certain that we are going to have a good final report and that we're going to use those tools to make things better, not just for now, but for the generations to come, to make certain that the City of Bell is still here in 20 years. We found that over 17 years there was a systematic practice of deceit, of lack of information, of policies that really hindered the ability for local citizens to come in and take any action whatsoever. That culminated with the blatant disregard for a community that for the most part is 90% Latino and technically a quote-unquote disenfranchised community. We're talking about a median income of about $20,000 in the City of Bell. We're talking about 38,000 plus folks in about 2.1 square miles. And so it was very, very easy for a select few to make sure there was no internet, make sure that there weren't any best practices, that you only met the minimum requirements of posting an agenda in some discrete place in a park somewhere so that there was maybe 3 people at any given time at any council meeting. It was a systematic approach to deceive the public to make certain that whatever it is they were conspiring, that they achieved. So, again, one of the best things that we could have done was post the city salaries online. We actually coordinated with the State Comptroller's Office that week of August 16th, 2010. The City of Bell was one of the first cities to post those online. We now make reference online on the city website straight to the Comptroller's Office so that people have access to that. And we also post it in all of our Parks and Rec sites and all of our computer locations. And we post everything on the city clerk website. We post the council agenda. We post council minutes. We institute a new Public Records Request Act. Before, you see, if you went to City Hall, you asked for a Public Records Request form, and they gave you the form. Then they charged you about $1 to $1.50 a page. And in a community where you're only making $20,000 a year and you have a kind of a gut feeling and you ask for maybe 150 documents, you're discouraged. So you come back and you say, forget about it. It was a very successful tool to make certain no one ever had access to anything. At the same time, they could honestly look at somebody in the face and say, hey, it's here, it's all here. If you want to take a look at it, just pay the fee. We've since established these very basic principles that maybe to all of us just seem so basic. What do you mean internet? What do you mean posting things online? What do you mean, just having access and maybe reducing fees to what, a nickel a page? Well, all of those basic things didn't exist until September 1st of 2010. We've made about 85% of those recommendations a reality. The controller's audits have been a wonderful tool for us. We've also been slow to implement some of those so that we can double check on what it means to the city of Bell and to the constituents. We have to learn from past experiences in the Southeast. We had a Southgate in the past. We've had other cities. We've had folks who have gone to the brink of bankruptcy. So the interim administration has to take a very cautious approach. We have to be systematic, and we have to be responsible to the very people we serve. And that means not taking a knee-jerk reaction, making sure that we restore our best practices, making certain that we make ourselves available to the public, making sure that we take those immediate actions that are necessary to make certain that the public has, one, accident, two, a restoration of trust. We've done a myriad of things. We've issued subpoenas for personal records to some of the former administration. We've terminated the illegal loan program established by the former administration. We asked the local supervisor, Gloria Molina, to come and conduct an audit of what we currently have and to help us project what the city of Bell can and can't afford next year and the year after that. So we've asked the supervisor to provide us those funds, and we're using that as a tool as well. We've eliminated the CalPERS supplemental retirement funding by the city of Bell and made the program the responsibility of the employee. We've reversed unauthorized increases of 10 and 15% to all sergeants, lieutenants, and captains in the City of Bell Police Department. We've achieved a savings of about $3.5 million basically by reducing, retiring, terminating, or accepting resignations from the executive and administrative management, individuals previously identified as having salaries not commensurate with the area comparisons or experience. We've basically taking the tools that the controller has given us and the county supervisor have given us, and we've tried to institute and basically recreate something that was non-existent in the city of Bell, and that is best practices, transparency, public information, and interaction with the local government. I wanted to. There's so much to go over. I just want to make sure that we give you guys some Q&A, and I'm here and I'm available. It's a big challenge. We want to make sure that we focus on what's responsible and responsive, and that legislatively we're not reactionary. And so I appreciate the chair and the opportunity to come before you to, at the very least, touch on some of the things that we've encountered and experienced.
Thank you, and certainly I think we all recognize the difficulty that you both are in and the challenges that you're facing. I know that the committee has some questions. If I may, if you could just elaborate a little bit on how the city is functioning, considering the circumstances around the council and the inability, sometimes struggling to get a quorum. And so if you could maybe just address how you guys are functioning under those type of circumstances.
It's truly been a challenge. Over the last 6.5 months, we've encountered at least 3 months where we haven't been able to have a quorum, either because some of the council was incarcerated or because people just didn't show up. In that particular instance, the CAO is then guided by the charter that was adopted. And that basically is our textbook. It's our how-to-do book. In this particular instance, the City of Bell has forwarded a lot of authority to the CAO. And so administratively, we've been able to function and able to get the bills paid, making sure that we have all the utilities taken care of, making sure we're not closing our doors, making sure we're accessible to the people. So in most cases, we've been able to achieve with the impossible, which is have the city of Bell be operational. So we haven't skipped a beat, but it's been very, very challenging, especially when some of the permanent fixes require legislative action, and in this particular case, the city of Bell being the legislator, if you will, or the implementer of that legislative will.
Thank you. Mr. Hueso.
Thank you. And Mr. Carrillo and Caso, I just want to thank you and commend you for taking on what appears to be one of the most undesirable jobs in California. And I think you guys are doing a fantastic job, what it sounds like. What is the current state of the City of Bell's finances?
Great question. The Supervisor Molina, LA County Board of Supervisors, currently released the audit that we requested to give us that determination. And it basically, and I'll give you the Reader's Digest version, it says that we're no different than many of the cities and counties of the state of California, and that we currently have a huge challenge in balancing, in sustaining our current makeup of what makes up the city, meaning the way we currently operate, public safety is one of our biggest challenges. And in this particular case, the city of Bell has its own police department. That takes up about a little more than 60% of our budget. The rest is other departments. And those findings basically outline what we already knew, and that is that we have to work diligently here in the next few months to make certain that we adopt a budget that is real. And what I mean by that is that what most cities do, and this is just in my brief experience, is they balance on paper. So most cities, and I'll give you an example. I mean, the city of Maywood, just north of us, several cities in the state of California basically borrow from Peter to pay Paul. And that's how they get a budget to the city council for adoption. So they say, we'll loan on paper from the redevelopment agency or from the waste management agency, or, you know, and they balance a budget. But cash flow is an issue. So part of what this audit was is to give us real numbers. What is our cash flow? What's our projection? What do we really bring in on a monthly and yearly basis, so that we understand what our budget is, what our budget and our obligation is going to be. We have a challenge with also sustaining our retirement, right? We are going to anticipate a huge drawdown on those retirement salaries, not just from the big eight, as they like to call them, but from our police department and other public employees. What are we going to do, and what is the city of Bell going to do as those public retirement obligations come knocking on our door, when the city of Bell is sustaining and at times dropping tax base? It's a very small place. How much tax base can you possibly draw down? So dealing with those issues, this is a microcosm of the state of California, dealing with some real issues up front and providing a real budget with those solutions is going to be our challenge.
Thank you. Mr. Lara.
Wanted to bring back the question I asked the controller about the sewage fees, and I know there's disagreement in terms of that, and so I wanted to just probe you on your opinion on the sewage fees.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Lara, and thank you for the members of the committee. My name is Jamie Caso at the law firm Myers-Nave. In 2007, the City Council authorized two different ways to pay for sewer services. They authorized standby charges, and they authorized a property-related sewer service fee. With regard to both, it appeared in our review in responding to the controller's inquiry on this issue preliminarily that the city complied with the requirements of Proposition 218 to the extent it applied to the city's actions. And we found that the standby charges, it is our position, standby charges were or are exempt from the Proposition 218 requirements. After approving both, though, our analysis of the documents show that the city has only assessed or has only collected the sewer service fees, not the standby charges. In fact, the sewer service fees, to our understanding, are the same as they were when they were adopted back in 1992. The controller in our office, we did exchange letters. Mr. Brownfield from the controller's office provided his analysis, disagreeing with ours, and we look forward to continuing to work with the controller's office to resolve that dispute.
Thank you. And I also wanted to talk about the auditing firm that the city used.
You still don't have them, do you?
I hope not. I wanted to see, or wanted to hear from you, was it I mean, obviously it was the same auditing firm. Was it the same auditor throughout the same years that you noticed?
At least for the 3 that were audited, yes.
It was a 3-year term in which they audited the city's financial records. They are no longer employed by the city, and the city is currently looking to go out to RFP for other firms to examine its financial books.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Bradford.
Is it my understanding, Mr. Carrillo, that the city of Bell was a general law city and then went to the voters and changed it to a charter city? And I'm trying to understand, what was the justification and reasoning for that?
Sir, that is a great question. I don't know what the justification is. I haven't been able to find anything that says or gives me any rationale as to why. It was very basic. Legal counsel drafted a summary and a report and took all the necessary steps to have an election and to make the general city move towards a charter city. Honestly, I'm still a little baffled, and I haven't found the answer.
I think I know the answer, and I think some of us who have served on local government know the answer. But, Mr. Chairman, I would think that is something that we should look at as to the guidelines on when a city changes itself from a general law city to a charter city. I think those should be red flags as to asking the hard questions of why the switch, because I believe a general law city has a little bit more, the state, I should say, has a little bit more accountability and oversight of a general law city than it does a charter city. Second question is, understanding that the council really only can hire 2 individuals, city attorney and city manager. To what extent does the city attorney find himself culpable? And I'm not here to point fingers, but if they're the legal counsel for the council, what level of oversight should he or she administered here prior to letting some of this come forth? Because they're primarily in trouble due to lack of good legal counsel and guidelines.
I'll defer to our legal counsel on that matter.
Senator Bradford, that's a very good question, assuming, of course, you're not insinuating this city attorney was implicated.
Mr. Counsel, I know your reputation all too well, and I know you weren't there, and I know you're one of the better ones out there, so we appreciate you, and I'm comforted by you being your representative.
Thank you, Assemblyman. I hope this broadcast is going throughout the state of California. My law firm and I truly appreciate that, as do my children and my wife. Very good point. And without disclosing too much, suffice it to say, any criminal culpability, we obviously would defer to the Los Angeles District Attorney on that. But I think that there are obligations set forth in the Bell City Charter, and there are obligations set forth in the Government Code with regard, and our ethical duties through the State Bar with regard to our obligations to our client. And is a paramount of importance and concern as a practitioner that you ultimately have to protect a client. Whether there were some misfeasance, malfeasance in this instance, I'd prefer not to go there at this point. But I think it appears that there were several instances where there was 1 or 2 individuals that may have run amok, and the city attorney may not have known of everything that was going on, as did the city council may not have known. And I think that one member pointed that out earlier with respect to what came out in the Los Angeles Times. That may have been Assembly Member Norby that was pointing to that very fact. And Assemblyman, you and I have discussed this issue before. So Is there an obligation on the city attorney? Absolutely. Is it always fulfilled by folks up and down the state? Probably not always, and that's an unfortunate circumstance, and it's something I think that needs to be addressed. I know the League of California Cities, through the City Attorney's Department, looks very seriously at this issue. Our law firm, we painstakingly hold training classes every year internally with regard to what our obligations are, and I got to believe that other law firms do the same. Ultimately, it comes down to the practitioner, and it comes down to the issue. You can't legislate, as you pointed out earlier this morning, you cannot legislate integrity.
Thank you. Mr. Lai.
Thank you. I had the same concerns that Assemblymember Bradford had addressed when the city changed from a general law city to a charter city. Because I believe the process is they got about 15% of the signatures from the local voters, but when the election day came around, it was about a 1.1 voter turnout, 400 voters turned out, and certainly it's an issue that should be looked at closely because certainly this played a key role in how the decisions were able to be carried out with less oversight. The other concern was what you've already addressed was the role of the city attorney. It hasn't come out very much in this hearing today, but certainly city attorneys in many different cities review contracts, give legal opinions. They play that critical role in kind of being a little bit more objective and giving a sound legal opinion before any contract or negotiation is done. But is there any? I know you said it's hard to legislate integrity, as has been said. But has there been any, because of this particular circumstance and the role that the prior city attorney played in the city of Bell, is there any procedures or any policies that have been put in place to make it clear to future city councils about what the role of the city attorney is in how decisions get made for the city?
In asking that question, are you referencing specifically as to Bell or throughout the state of California?
For the city.
For the city of Bell, well, Mr. Carrillo and I work very closely together, and essentially we communicate. My wife refers to him as my novia, which is my girlfriend. I mean, we're constantly together, and we go over everything together. And he does nothing without me knowing what's going on, and I do nothing, very little, without him knowing what's going on. It just doesn't happen. We have that kind of a relationship. I'm not sure if that relationship previously existed in the city of Bell, and it's an important relationship. You know, as a city attorney, you have the obligation, you work for the city council, but you have to work with the top administrator, whether it be a city manager or a CAO, and I'm not sure if that relationship existed. We review I am given the opportunity to review everything that Mr. Carrillo has done, and then we ensure that he communicates, either he or I communicate with the city council on a regular basis via email, or we have briefing sessions with the members. We do not violate the Brown Act. I want to assure the committee of that, but we do have those briefing sessions alerting to them of the steps we're taking. Mr. Carrillo pointed out what steps he has taken to make sure that the city functions, that the grass at the parks are cut, the streets are swept, the trash is picked up, the police are patrolling the streets. All of that is being done, and we constantly inform the city council. It has occurred on several different occasions where members of the city council have remarked to us, we have been briefed more on issues we're dealing with as a city in the last 6 months than we were in the previous 6 years, 12 years. So we have tried to open that up. Members of the public, though many of them in front of the television cameras, I think Chairman Smythe mentioned the issue of our council meetings. Many people may slam what's going on within the city. After the meetings, though, they come up and they say, hey, you guys are doing a good job, and we're actually seeing more than we've ever seen before. We're actually having access to documents. One of the things that was not previously done in the city of Bell, the warrant register, for those of you who have sat on city councils, warrant registers are published, and they're provided to members of the city, members of the public, rather, to review and see who you're paying, what vendor are you paying, what's your obligation to CalPERS, what's your obligations in terms of payroll. In Bell, that wasn't happening, and soon after, I think it was our second regular meeting in September, we provided those documents out to the members of the public. They had never seen it before. And so we've tried to open things up to comply with best practices as set forth, whether it be in the Brown Act or in other areas of the government code or within just the charter itself.
Lastly, I just wanted to also commend you for the great strides you've made so far in a very short period of time to really try to clean up a very difficult situation. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norby.
Comments have been made about the nature of Bell, and I may have made some comments too, but at the same time, this problem occurs all over the state. I come from a county that experienced the largest municipal bankruptcy in the country's history, County of Orange, relatively affluent county. And so the lack of oversight is not unique to areas where people may have a less of an educational level than, say, affluent areas of Orange County, which has very affluent areas. And I remember the chairman of the board I wasn't on the board of supervisors at the time. I was later after the bankruptcy. But I heard a story that the chairman of the board of supervisors was told by a number of people, look, the treasurer needs some oversight. He's getting involved in things. Now, in this case, it was an elected treasurer. So it was a little bit different than an appointed city manager, but the board still had oversight, and everything he did had to be approved by the board of supervisors. And the chairman of the board of supervisors said, well, I don't think we ought to have a oversight committee of Bob Citron, because that might hurt his feelings. I mean, everything he's doing is fine. It's working out, so why ask a lot of questions? Well, the only stupid question, whether you remember the Orange County Board of Supervisors or the Bell City Council, we say that as teachers, the only stupid question is the one that you're afraid to ask because you think you'll look stupid. But if you don't know the answer, you need to know the answer. And I think that affects a lot of people all over the state and all over the country that are in elected office, especially part-time. The first time I ever heard of the city of Bell was watching roller derby back in the 1960s. Maywood Bell Ford was the main sponsor on Channel 5. I don't know if Maywood Bell Ford is still there. They're probably long gone. They're probably at an auto mall somewhere in the suburbs. I was in Bell just last Friday. I took a drive around both the city of Vernon and the city of Bell. One is a city with a lot of money and no people, and one is a city of a lot of people and no money. So they're kind of right next to each other and mirror images of each other. I drove by Bell High School. Glad to see that is one of the few LA City high schools. I know Bell is a separate city, but it's in the LUSD, which was not torn down or modified. Those bright, purple and gold colors are still there, and that old building built in the 20s is still fairly intact. I did see a lot of signs as well, recall signs for aspiring council candidates. I know both you gentlemen have been here once before to the legislature. It might be helpful for us as electeds to have electeds come, but I know the status of your council is somewhat mixed in that the council majority of 3 are under indictment, and the one person who's not under indictment is not actually the mayor, so it's hard for him to speak for the city yet. So maybe you could walk through the chronology of when the recall election is happening, how many are running. I presume that the replacement election is occurring at the same time as the recall election, and when will you have a functioning city council to either work with or, depending on who they are, to work with someone on this?
I'll defer to the city attorney since he's been in very close contact with the LA County's Register Recorder's Office.
Thank you, Assemblyman Norby, for those questions. The recall election and the general election, by coincidence, were able to be held on the same day, March 8th. 4 members of the City Council, one who has resigned, are subject to recall on March 8th. Of those 4, 2 of those terms also expire concurrent with the approval of the canvass of the votes, which more than likely will occur sometime late March, early April.
So they don't need to be recalled. They're leaving anyway. Then.
Essentially, they're still subject to recall under the Elections Code, but their successors will be elected through the general election. We worked very closely with County Council, LA County Council, and with the Registrar of Voters to figure all of these machinations out for March 8th. There is one member of the council I said has resigned, former Councilman Luis Artiga. His seat is being filled through a special election. And then we have current Vice Mayor Teresa Jacobo, who is subject to recall, and there are 2 candidates that are currently running to replace her should she be recalled. We have a slew of other candidates. I think there are 10 or 12 running in the open seats,
And you have one individual not under recall because he didn't get the salary for whatever reason.
Correct.
And he will continue for another 2 years, or he's
subject. He's subject to his term expires this March as well. So he's subject to having to run for election.
And he is
appointed to the board.
Okay.
This election is being conducted in concert.
So you have till another month and a half before you have an effectively functioning council, right?
Month and a half plus or minus, because then you have the canvass of the votes, and then it has to be brought to the legislative body for approval. And at the point it's approved, then the new members
maybe 2
step
months
in at that very meeting.
Right.
And then they would select among themselves a leadership mayor and vice mayor of the city council.
Okay.
So we'll have new members beginning of April, we anticipate.
All right.
Well, we want to thank you guys for coming up, and I know everybody here understands the difficulty that you have. Certainly, Chair Lars in the middle of it, and he knows it best. But I want to thank the committee for their time this morning. I think this, as informational hearings go, this was probably one of the better ones that we've had, and actually really to receive some great information that we can use going forward. And again, would like to thank you guys for coming, Mr. Lara.
Just want to thank you again for your leadership in inviting the State Controller to come to the City of Bell and do the great work they've done. And I appreciate the work of all the state agencies involved. And I want to just reemphasize that the crooks in Bell that took advantage of my constituents are not the true face of Bell. The true face of Bell are hardworking people that are working hard every day to make ends meet. And I caution us from brushing Bell with the broad stroke, because the true victims here are the working men and women in Bell, and they're honest, hardworking folks that deserve an honest government. And so I look forward to working with you to ensure that is what they get. So thank you again, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. We're adjourned.